this, maybe you are familiar with it, the frog in boiling water metaphor that seeks to illustrate the difference between sudden and gradual peril. In one particular context, it prompts an important question. When will we know? When will we really know that we are officially under authoritarian rule here? Remember that when you consider all of the breaking stories and headlines we woke up to this morning. As we speak, there are more than 2,000 armed soldiers, military, patrolling the streets of our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. The federal task force managing the D.C. takeover says that the majority of those troops are carrying their service-issued M17 pistols, while a number are packing M4 rifles. At the moment, orders are to use those weapons, quote, as a last resort in response to an imminent threat of death or serious bodily harm. Troops are not making arrests, not yet at least. We should be clear, members of the United States military are among the finest and bravest and most noble men and women our country has to offer, period, full stop. The fault in everything we discussed today does not lie with them, but with the person giving them their orders, the country's elected commander-in-chief. Donald Trump today, in the midst of signing executive orders ending cashless bail and criminalizing flag burning, again suggested he'll send troops to Chicago and maybe also Baltimore, potentially putting nearly 4 million Americans under this dark new rule of law, law and order regime in America. Then he said this.
As you all know, Chicago's a killing field right now. And they don't acknowledge it. And they say, we don't need him. Freedom, freedom. He's a dictator. He's a dictator. A lot of people are saying maybe we like a dictator. I don't like a dictator. I'm not a dictator. I'm a man with great common sense, and I'm a smart person. And when I see what's happening to our cities, and then you send in troops, instead of being praised, they're saying you're trying to take over the republic.
Quote, I'm a smart person, says not so many actually smart people, but okay. Is the water hot enough for you yet? Just so you know, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker is expected to address the potential for troops arriving in his city, the city of Chicago, at any moment. We're monitoring that for you. But just as important as the what in these matters today is the why. Because, well, the Trump administration will publicly, in statements like that, say that these drastic, unprecedented measures are designed to fight crime. The reality is that, as far as we can tell, so far, it is not about that. It's a show of force. New York Times tracked incoming defendants to a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., people appearing before a magistrate judge who would otherwise be dealt with at a local court level if charges were ever filed against them at all. Quote, one man had been arrested over an open container of alcohol. Another had been charged with threatening the president after delivering a drunken outburst following his arrest on vandalism. And one defendant's gun case so alarmed prosecutors that they intend to drop the case. To defense lawyers and even some prosecutors, many of the cases that have landed in court have raised concerns that the takeover seems intended to artificially inflate its effect because government lawyers have been instructed to file the most serious federal charges, no matter how minor the incident. Which brings us back to where we started. When will we know? When will all of us know we've crossed into something new, into authoritarianism? Bill Maher, of all people, this weekend had a theory about what comes next.
Let me just describe some of the steps, and you tell me if I'm being paranoid. First, create a masked police force. Get people used to looking at that. Normalize snatching people off the street. Get them used to that. Normalize seeing the National Guard and the military on the street. Then start talking about crime in the capital, which is basically, has always been a fairly crime-ridden city. This is our nation's capital where elections are decided. And then because the crime is so bad, have other states start sending their troops, not just the National Guard there in D.C., but now at least 6 other states are sending their troops, which then Trump can then federalize. So you're having many states' troops on the ground there, and now they're under federal control. So you have in the capital a sort of permanent police presence. So when an election dispute might come up, just hypothetically. I mean, I don't want to be a big pessimist, and I'm going to pretend for the rest of the duration that the Democrats do have a chance of winning, and they might win the next election. I just don't think they're ever going to take power, because this is what's going to happen. Because I think this coup is going to go off a lot smoother than the last one. That
slow-moving coup, finally uttered out loud by Bill Maher, is where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Former Adjutant General for the Illinois National Guard and former Illinois Democratic Congressman, retired Major General William Enyart is here. Also joining us is staff writer for The Atlantic, author of Autocracy, Inc., Anne Applebaum is here. And former Democratic Senator, MSNBC political analyst Claire McCaskill is here. Anne Applebaum, I start with you. We tried to focus in on the idea that authoritarianism could happen here. And we debated internally behind the scenes whether it's authoritarianism in America, it could happen here, question mark, or authoritarianism in America, it could happen here, no question mark. And I guess my question for you today is authoritarianism in America is here, right?
So it's been here for a while in the sense that authoritarian behaviors that we are used to thinking of belonging to different kinds of countries or different eras are already with us. So, for example, election officials in Arizona being hounded out of their jobs by mobs, that's something that you would only see in a state where organized mobs can hound officials out of their jobs. And that's something that has already happened in America. Or Congress holding fake hearings over events that didn't happen in order to create public indignation, over something non-existent. So the creation of using politics to create fake spectacles, for example, these are authoritarian habits and practices. Kleptocracy, the use of public office to hide or steal money or to gain money. Also already with us. It's been with us at a low level for a time. Now it's exploded. It's at a level never imagined before. The president has a cryptocurrency company into which people openly pay money. They don't get anything for their payment other than the fact that the president knows they've paid them, and they can do so anonymously. All these kinds of behaviors have been building for some time, even before the election, and now they're simply coming to fruition. There isn't going to be a moment. It's not like there's going to be a red flashing light that goes off. I mean, maybe something will happen at the midterms or maybe not. But the increasing use of authoritarian tactics and the corresponding answer of authoritarian behaviors is here. And it's really important that Americans recognize it and name it and understand it. We are a people who are used to the idea of our own exceptionalism. We are used to the idea that we live in a long tradition, and we're right to have those feelings, but that can also make us blind to the possibilities. And it's very useful to have somebody like Bill Maher or you speaking about this this change of system as something that could happen. It doesn't mean that it will happen or that we can't fight it, but it's useful to begin to stretch our imaginations.
Are there things that in other countries that have crossed all these lines, like Friday, a raid of an outspoken political critic at the home of John Bolton, a court-approved search of the home of John Bolton, seemed to cross a threshold for a lot of people watching closely. I'm sure that they will be savvy enough to manufacture a narrative about something he did wrong. But I wonder if there are lines that are getting crossed in active duty armed military on the streets of American cities, of political opponents having their homes searched, of people in the media bending a knee. Are there lines that we're crossing that in other countries have woken up the general population to the threat?
I mean, in another country, yeah, I think having armed military on the streets of the Capitol would feel alarming. One of the things that's happening here is that the Trump administration keeps pretending that it's doing something else. So I actually got in an argument on a podcast a few days ago with somebody who wanted to have an argument with me about crime in Washington. And I was confused by the conversation because, of course, the issue isn't crime in Washington. I mean, whether there is or there isn't, or whether it's going up or not, it's absolutely irrelevant. The reason why troops are on the street in Washington has nothing to do with crime. The military, the National Guard aren't trained to deal with crime. They're not the right tool to use if you have crime. If there were a crime emergency, they wouldn't be the right thing to send. But the administration, by continually, as you said, supplying these fake narratives, and by getting people to argue about crime in Washington or whether John Bolton did something right or something wrong, means that people are, as you say, missing the point. We're missing the milestones. We aren't seeing what's happening. We aren't paying attention to what the consequences could be of having armed troops on our street. We get used to them. They're there the next time power changes hands. Maybe they prevent that from happening. All those things are now possible, and it's important, again, that we begin to name things by their real names.